Welcome. Today's post is, The Hope Diamond Curse, Fonzie's Motorcycle Jumps and Major Updates. Published on December 15, 2022. There are few symbols as prominent as diamonds in pop culture. The more popular the symbol, the deeper that rabbit hole, so let's get into the secret side of diamonds. Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button, and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts, and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. There are few symbols as prominent as diamonds in pop culture. Diamonds are a popular MacGuffin in countless films as the goal/reward. A diamond can therefore represent something of value, but there's more to it than just that. Many comms have a public face with a symbol all people know. In this case, the idea of diamonds being valuable, but there is often more underneath. The more popular the symbol, the deeper that rabbit hole, so let's get into that secret side of diamonds. Titanic was the highest-grossing film of all time for 4 years, and its story concludes with an old woman dropping a famous diamond into an underwater tomb. This diamond is said to have been based on the famously cursed Hope Diamond, and that's as good a place as any to begin decoding diamonds. The Hope Diamond Curse, ABBA. The Hope Diamond wasn't called the Hope Diamond for most of its existence in history, but I will be referring to it that way throughout for clarity. The Hope Diamond is said to have popped into existence in 1666 when Jean-Baptiste Tavernier obtained the Hope Diamond on his 6th voyage from India. He sold the cursed Hope Diamond to the King of France in 1668 shortly after making its existence public. The king was so pleased with the diamond he made Jean-Baptiste a noble. After Jean-Baptiste sold the Hope Diamond, the French monarchy, the first victims of the curse are said to be the inheritors of that diamond. I.e., the royalty of France when Marie Antoinette was executed during the French Revolution. Note the bad press she often gets. Let them eat cake, a propaganda believed in spite of it having no historical basis. Note that America named cities for her due to the French help in the American Revolution. This puts her at odds with who? I'll return to this point at the end of the section, as we first need to understand 1666 before we get into the late 1700s. Jean-Baptiste is said to have obtained the Hope Diamond from his expedition to India in 1666. Notice the geography. Iran just so happens to be right along the way. I believe if we look at Iran in 1666 we'll see the real reason for this symbolism and why the King of France was so happy to give Jean-Baptiste a patent of nobility. October 12, 1666. Abbas II Shah of Iran's sudden death without designating a successor. 6 days until replacement is found. 1666 Jean-Baptiste Tavernier 6th voyage to India acquires Hope Diamond from crooked priest. I believe Jean-Baptiste was being rewarded for the assassination of the Abbas, the leader of Iran. Without getting into the minutiae of the Dutch East India Company, I can demonstrate this by laying out the symbols used. Because I haven't touched on why I keep highlighting Jean-Baptiste, he wasn't the only famous Jean-Baptiste in 1666 connected with the King of France. Understanding the other one unlocks more of it. October 12, 1666. Abbas II Shah of Iran's sudden death without designating a successor. 6 days until replacement is found. 1666 Jean-Baptiste Tavernier 6th voyage to India acquires Hope Diamond from crooked priest, sells to King of France. December 22, 1666. Jean-Baptiste Colbert meets with King of France to form one of the first science institutes in world. Jean-Baptiste Colbert met with the King of France to establish one of the first academies of science in the world right 2 months after Abbas of Iran's sudden death. I believe the death of the leader of Iran was a proof of concept for how these coded communications using science can operate in public. The point of academies of science being used to coordinate overthrows publicly is an important one to keep in mind for almost every post. Now, if it were just this, I would call this theory plausible, but I wouldn't say it was a certainty. The thing is, if this were true, then that would mean Abbas was a powerful symbol of overthrowing nations. It would mean we likely would have heard the word in pop culture, as surely they would invoke it again and again. Wait. Does the name ABBA sound familiar to you? It should. I talk about it frequently. March 2, 1974. Grand jury concludes POTUS Richard Nixon is involved in Watergate cover-up. March 4, 1974. ABBA Waterloo album. I had no idea Abbas was an Iran leader that got overthrown, but if you've read my past posts you know that I sure as heck decoded ABBA the band as symbolic of overthrow. Invoking Waterloo Napoleon surrender as a way to signal Nixon to surrender, which he did shortly after. Lyrics of History Keeps Repeating Itself. The Hope Diamond eventually fell into the hands of King George, who viewed it as a trophy for defeating Napoleon. It would be hard to get more clear than that for a symbol, but we still aren't done. The inspiration for the Heart of the Ocean from Titanic was the Hope Diamond. This confirms it yet again because Titanic is how they killed Jack Astor and creating the Federal Reserve. I go over that in many posts. Yet another major overthrow. Note how Astor was Republican and that was the side that was against the Federal Reserve. So removing him likely removed the backing of any support for it, as he was the one that ran the hotels, which I've decoded in many posts as being how politicians of the day were controlled. So why is it called the Hope Diamond? Well, the origin of the name. Henry Hope, which has its origin with a man who helped Napoleon and the USA with the Louisiana Purchase. He went from being among the most wealthy to poor shortly afterwards. This tells us that once again the powers behind the UK, i.e. Rothschild, were taking out opponents one after another. With all that in mind, it becomes clear this diamond represents going against the banks. This explains why when Abbas died it was as Iran was going through a financial decline, mentioned above in Abbas' article. That's a lot of information, so to recap. Jean-Baptiste pretended to go to India when he really was tied to ops in Iran to remove Abbas for the French monarchy. Another Jean-Baptiste set up one of the first academies of science in France through the King of France the same year as the experiment with Abbas was proven successful. I can't be sure how they removed Abbas, but given the comms of a crooked priest being involved, I would think it had to do with missionaries and trade wars with the Dutch East India Company. However they managed it. The symbol of Abbas became shorthand for overthrow. This is even more clear when we look at the fact that they changed their name to ABBA specifically for Waterloo. As the lyrics of Waterloo go, history is always repeating itself. I'm very confident of my decode given how many connections we have, but there is a major bit of speculation I can do now that we've established things. Francis Hope tried to sell the diamond several times but was denied. Specifically in 1898, 1899, and was finally allowed in 1901. Those dates ring a bell. I go over 1901 as one of the most frequent dates that Teddy Roosevelt was installed at that time with the assassination of McKinley. To get him on the ticket they had to kill Hobart the VP, which just so happens to have been in 1899. My hypothesis is that the Hope Diamond was used as a scarlet letter for the Hope family. It was the symbol of them funding Napoleon through the Louisiana Purchase. The powers behind the UK believing that due to their meddling they hadn't taken over the USA and installed a central bank as they had long done in most other places. After decades of pressure the family, now poor, was trying to get rid of that scarlet letter of a diamond. This was not allowed until the takeover was complete, which completed with Teddy Roosevelt. Now that is speculation, but it fits with everything I've decoded, and so I leave this idea until I can confirm or reject it. I said before I'd return to the overthrow of Marie Antoinette. In my digging I found a curious connection. In 1953, when Marilyn Monroe's career skyrocketed, she wore the diamond of the mother of Marie Antoinette. Singing, "Diamonds are a girl's best friend." A mother that disliked Marie Antoinette and scolded her for laziness and frivolity. Given how she is remembered in history, that's an interesting fact to pick up. It could be nothing, but I have decoded Marilyn Monroe as she was the intended vehicle to remove JFK through scandal. I have wondered if Monroe, as a symbol, is meant to invoke the Monroe Doctrine. The symbol being a global battlefield. Just like with her being the original Playboy bunny, a force used to overthrow foreign aggressors by controlling them with sex. That famous mole on her cheek being a symbol of what? 1953 Playboy, first issue with Marilyn Monroe. Did you know she also starred that year in a movie where she sang her famous, "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend"? A movie about seducing men. Let's dive into what diamonds symbolize. There is no better symbol for that than Marilyn Monroe herself. Diamond Symbolism explained. Marilyn Monroe played a role in popularizing diamonds in her breakout role of 1953. Notice her iconic diamond performance is connected to her famous Playboy shoot. Apparently the original version of the movie had her nude outside of diamonds, but they then switched to a more modest outfit due to Playboy. Playboy. A diamond connection is likely why when Hugh Hefner exited the world's biggest uncut diamond was sold. September 26, 2017. World's biggest uncut diamond sells for $53 million. September 27, 2017. Hugh Hefner death reported. A movie about finding a man to seduce. Which given it was time to the original Playboy attracting men into buying her pornography. The connection with Playboy is worth taking a slight detour on. I show this com in many posts, but that's because it's extremely relevant. August 9, 2019, equals Russia hides a nuclear accident. August 10, 2019, equals CIA blackmailer Epstein dead. September 26, 2017, equals Russia hides a nuclear accident. September 27, 2017, equals CIA blackmailer Hefner dead. The nuclear connection, as I've discussed in many posts, is because of the boom symbolism. Diamond as a symbol connects. In fact, diamond batteries are a thing for nuclear. The most expensive cut diamond is called the Oppenheimer blue above. That's the same name as the father of the atomic bomb. The name of the Bond girl in Diamonds Are Forever is Tiffany Diamonds Oppenheimer. She was an actress famous for attaching herself to celebrities. Consider what you remember from the Hope Diamond section. Overthrowing countries. Nuclear bombs creating submission of massive territories. It fits, and how are these used in modern times? Who might be a face of modern blackmail? How about Ray Chandler? 2009, Rachel Chandler is tied to Maxwell, and note her habit of tattooing her lip with truffle. 2009, Prince Philip's truffle trees black diamonds not giving birth. Symbolism of blackmail not bearing fruit. As in Prince Philip wasn't going to get the scandal. This changed in 2018, shown 2 images up, when Prince Philip suddenly bore fruit in his truffle trees. What happened next? February 22, 2021, Prince Philip fake obituary. February 24, 2021, statue of Queen Elizabeth beheaded, head has not been recovered. April 9, 2021, Prince Philip death. Jeffrey Epstein dies at age 66, 6 months. Prince Philip dies at age 99, 9 months. These are all comms tied to what is going on behind the scenes with fake deaths. I go over it frequently. They didn't have to time it so precisely, but doing so allows future events to go more smoothly. This is all part of a long-form plan to go public. The more obvious the comms get, the easier it will be for the public to recognize what's actually going on. I have updates in my last 2 posts about these ongoing ops, and there's another one in my update section today. Update. Barely a few hours after posting, someone from Telegram saw the subject matter of the post and reminded me of a film focused on a diamond theft that has a very interesting date. January 19, 2001. Snatch, diamond heist film released in USA. January 20, 2001. George W. Bush inauguration. George W. Bush was coming in, and before executive power could be leveraged there was a message sent. Notice key points of the film: the man after the diamond, Cousin Avi, as in the most popular video file format from 2001 online. The name of the film, Snatch, as in stealing plus sex. George Bush, gets injured by Brad Pitt when he decides to teach a lesson to poor scam artists. This is symbolic of MK Ops being deployed, which is what took H.W. Bush out of the fight back in the early 90s. The film looks to be symbolic of moving problematic files, i.e., ABBA, out of the hands of Bush. It was originally released in the UK just before the election and likely was to announce how they would handle a Bush win, as it was at the time a toss-up between Gore and Bush. There's a lot to learn from this film, and I may further dissect it, and many other Diamond films, in the future. Seeing a George W. Bush symbol being viewed as a mindless fighter, for example, who simply does what he is told, is exactly as insulting as it sounds. It fits the comms, as they are about protecting themselves against him. Don't misunderstand though, diamonds are connected to blackmail, but that doesn't mean diamonds symbolize blackmail. The actual symbol for diamond is simple. The blunt answer is closest to what a child is taught, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle twinkle little star. Diamond equals star. And because stars are blackmailed, it makes the symbol go hand in hand. You don't get to become a star without blackmail, and as such a diamond can be used to symbolize the blackmail. In a way, it is the essence of many a star. Therefore, looking at diamond comms, we can predict there should often be close proximity to blackmail comms. For example, the most popular modern diamond comm might well be this song from Rihanna. September 26, 2012, Diamond's Rihanna song. September 26, 2012, Terramar founded Maxwell, same logo designer as Obama campaign. Terramar is the country Maxwell set up and had powerful people become citizens. I've theorized this is a way to avoid age of consent laws, but it's unclear to me if that's the actual point. At the very least, it seems citizenship is tantamount to being photoed as what I suspect is an announcement of blackmailed ally. We already know she is tied strongly to that with Epstein. In fact, he was a funder of it. Notice her participation at the UN being introduced as the person that controls the oceans around the world. Her story begins with diving in her submarine. I'll return to the submarine comm later. They timed the album with that Diamonds song on it to the most curious post Maxwell made on the Terramar project site. The only one she gave a like. November 19, 2012, Rihanna Diamonds album. November 19, 2012, Maxwell posts Terramar octopus breaking out of glass. Note the connection with the Obama-era satellite showing a giant octopus taking over the world. This was given special press coverage due to Snowden's NSA leaks. The point of an octopus breaking out is likely the same symbol. The ongoing Snowden ops with the intent of releasing the monstrous vision of NSA spying. All intended to blind the NSA for scams, doubly important for Maxwell to keep her operations dark. This hypothesis becomes more likely when I reconcile the news events around that time. November 19, 2012. Maxwell posts Terramar octopus breaking out of glass. November 20, 2012. Elmo voice actor quits over sexual misconduct with underage boys. November 21, 2012. Rise of the Guardians film. I've gone over Elmo's symbolism tied to the blackmail ops with sedation in my Sedated in Seattle post. His quitting might have been a message on why they were going ahead with NSA exposure, as he simply returned to the job not long after. The film released at this time involves the Sandman, a mythical man that puts children to sleep. The film involves retrieving stored memories. The idea was in trying to expose the ones collecting their blackmail. The most direct result of this was the Iran deal, but it's clearly much more than that. An ability to protect their own ops without every piece of blackmail they make being co-opted by outside parties hiding behind NSA protections. Given Terramar used the same logo designer in Obama's election campaign, one might expect them to time diamonds to his election. Well, they did that too. November 8, 2012. Rihanna Diamonds YouTube. November 6, 2012. Obama election. Lyrics of that diamond song. Find light in the beautiful sea. All of these ops share a history. It traces back to the 50s with Playboy and Marilyn Monroe's diamonds. This is why next I want to dig into the most popular symbolism of the 50s. Which ironically requires me to decode the 70s. By which I mean the most popular show in the 70s was a show about the 50s. So this might just be 1950s comms distilled, and the name is of course Happy Days, 1950s. A show with many famous aspects, the most prominent of which is a Jewish actor playing an Italian biker named the Fonzie. Pronounced Fonzie. I'll get to him as well as his famous shark jumping of course, but first. Obviously there are episodes that discuss Marilyn Monroe. The third episode being the first to do this. So in this episode the underage main character going to a military, Marine stag party, to see a stripper come out of a cake. She asserts herself as the War Department's secret weapon. He ends up getting so drunk that she has to carry him back home. Notice how as soon as he talks about Marilyn Monroe he talks about a pretty girl being on the 10 of diamonds that you shouldn't bring home to mother. Stag party. That was the original name of Playboy. 1942 FDR directs Army build a nuke. 1942 Chicago Stag Field first self-sustained nuclear chain reaction by Army. 1942-1953, Hefner lives in Chicago, joins Army newspaper, calls nude magazine Stag Party. Again with a nuclear connection. And in case you forgot about the diamond connection to him and Epstein. The stone will tell us its story. So what is this show a comm for? Obviously as we've already connected it to blackmail creation, what kind of comms would you expect to see in the intro? First thing you see is a record. And then we have a girl on a date and suddenly her tail is removed. Tail/tail. In this context it's the symbol of recording and archiving sex. Notice as the car top rises we see a movie poster for Tin Star in the background, coming wed. Choices like that are intentional, so of all the 50s why choose a movie of October of 1957 as the intro? October 4, 1957, Sputnik launched. October 4, 1957, Leave It to Beaver debut. October 23, 1957, The Tin Star released. May 5, 1961, First human space flight. May 6, 1961, Leave It to Beaver, in the soup most expensive and popular episode. This implies that Happy Days is likely a continuation of the sedation blackmail ops going on in Leave It to Beaver. Sedating a child so that there is no awareness a crime has been taken place, the show's shtick of being ultra-moral is a joke about the dirty comms hiding under the surface. The symbols of Leave It to Beaver having the first TV toilet is tied to the people involved in blackmailing not retaining any copies of the acts themselves. Effectively keeping their hands as clean as possible in case of investigation. This is the same reason why Fonzie discusses writing on the bathroom wall whenever the subject of strippers comes up. In at least 2 different episodes and I only watched a few. The space connection is tied to turning people into stars. As in shooting someone into space by promoting them, and they only allow blackmailed people to become stars, and this is why blackmail comms are tied to space comms. As you see above Sputnik was launched during the debut, but the connection is even more clear because the most famous and expensive episode was timed to the very first successful US space launch. This was the next milestone after Sputnik which further cements the connection. Note some of the dialogue of the biggest episode. Show begins by talking about spraying trees for bugs. As in listening devices. Throws a party which involves breaking records if necessary, and then has Beaver falling in a cup of soup being offered by a giant woman on a billboard. Ends with him talking about how it was like he was naked and everyone was watching. Leave It to Beaver gives a shortcut to understanding this, but there are many differences due to advancements technologically. The main thing is that children were sedated and used for blackmail to own prospective stars. Sedation requires chemicals and the pilot for the show begins with Richie talking about his mother at the Red Cross volunteer work. Access to drugs. Discussion of his father working in the hardware business, electronics of the day, and that his father was the first on the block to get a television. His best friend climbing into his window. Symbolism of cooperation with an outside party watching inside. Note he talks about revolutionizing sex with TV, and then Richie Cunning ham radio, sits like a snake. Snake symbol of many people working as one. Ham radio confirmed to be used by spies even in modern times. Morse code comms are used and those are symbolized with ET as those are the basis of all coding. This ties into alien symbolism as foreign affiliation on public bands are picked up and tracked. I go over this frequently, but it's important, so I repeat it. Understanding ham symbolism is crucial as well as what it could mean when a pig is shown in pop culture. Then a running theme in the pilot episodes of not just Happy Days but every connected show to it, Laverne and Shirley, Love American Style, Mork and Mindy, being symbolism of sex plus ears. The symbol is of picking up audio. Like Gone with the Wind comms. Playboy era adjusting the rabbit ears until it blows up when the sun holds it. He goes out with a girl who ends up having been cheating on her boyfriend to see the first television. Recording cheating equals recording blackmail. This was the prototype that aired on Love, American Style but not the true first episode of Happy Days. Happy Days' first episode is even more telling, but let's go through the other ears first. In Mork and Mindy pilot Fonzie sets up the alien Mork on a date with Laverne, and he tries to sexually assault her earlobes. Laverne and Shirley Temple. In the Laverne and Shirley pilot Laverne breaks off the ear of a statue and takes it at a high-class party. They are poor but dress up with stolen dresses off of mannequins. The Fonzie makes a guest appearance to protect them from being arrested. Laverne was also the name of the stag party stripper for the Marines in Happy Days episode 3. That episode also involved dressing up a mannequin. The mannequin comm will become more clear shortly as how it relates to both. Though I want to mention that Fonzie plus stealing ears plus mannequins is a very specific situation, and while Fonzie is in 255 episodes of Happy Days, he's only in a few episodes of Laverne and Shirley and only in the pilot of Mork and Mindy. Yet despite all shows having tons of episodes, every iteration of their involvement boils down to Fonzie pimping Laverne. Penny Marshall equals cheap symbol. In Laverne and Shirley it's Shirley that jumps out of the cake for Fonzie after being talked into it by Laverne. A mannequin equals a girl that doesn't move but can be dressed up and slept with. Shirley Temple was the original child star. Famous for singing, on the good ship Lollipop, a song about going to sleep and flying in the sky, to become a star, a movie about a lucrative contract to secretly deliver a child and in exchange the girl involved gets adopted. Shirley in Laverne and Shirley is played by a girl named Cindy Williams. Public name, Shirley, hidden name, Cindy, Brady evidence hiding symbol, Williams is pinball symbolism in this context as they are Fonzie's girls who bases his operations in a diner. Note the first two Williams pinball machines that came up in the search on the left as involving girls seducing clowns. Pinball is a game installed into hotels from the 50s to the 80s time period. It's perfect for the ops because unlike any other device regular maintenance to remove quarters and replace pieces allowing for freely moving surveillance equipment into position. This is my speculation, but I did decode Knight Rider which implied this in its pilot. This may tie into Laverne's name being Penny as in a cheap game as a running gag in both episodes I watched was of her being far less attractive than Shirley. In the pilot episode it involves them getting undressed in a high society party after stealing the ear. Note the song they sing in the climax. High Hopes, a song made for a film with interesting imagery. A red-shoed kid being grabbed by a man. With Laverne convincing Shirley I suspect it is of ops getting a young girl to cooperate. Fonzie is the one that sets it up and so now we need to discuss where he fits in. Fonzie is played by a Jewish actor, and Laverne and Shirley begins with the Jewish language. Schlemiel, Schlemazel Hasenpfeffer Incorporated and Hopscotch, Child Plus Jumping Comms will be relevant later. Another connection with Happy Days is that both shows beginning with a count. Happy Days' first season begins with a countdown to 12, Rock Around the Clock, and in Laverne and Shirley they count to 8 and then say, Schlemiel Schlemazel, Hasenpfeffer Incorporated. To further discuss Fonzie, let's just go through an early episode till we get to him. Fonzie. Episode begins with a man with gems on shirt, diamond, stealing girls from Richie Cunningham and Potsy who only have their parents' car to drive. A man named Ralph Malph, played by Don Most, is the culprit. Often birthdates are used for TV characters to convey symbolism. August 8, 1953, Soviet Union announces nuclear bomb. August 8, 1953, Ralph Malph / Don Most born. Symbol of someone butting into the blackmail game. Competition with Soviet Union also running blackmail ops. Remember that everything is cell-based, and so promotional ops aren't focused at one Goliath organization but of multitudes of mid-sized ones, along with countless small people trying to make a beginning. This is the symbol of Richard Cunningham and Potsy, who are trying to pick up girls. It works for the regular audience as a symbol because it's relatable, but it serves double duty in comms as it's about setting up ops with girls. This take is more likely when we consider the next scene. What girls are used? Father's scene begins with "Watch him. Watch him." The daughter is hurt by his father, watching wrestling, complains that he dented my body. Then the son comes in and says he's 17 and ready to take on more responsibility. The symbol of the son working with the father on blackmail. Note the father asserts that he should follow in Beaver's footsteps rather than go for a car. This is right, as the 12-year-old sister talks about him going necking in the car. In episode 2 they have a code word for sex as submarines. Remember the Maxwell comms? Note the younger sister as well. 1960 10-17 US and Britain sign accord grants US access to British nuclear submarine base in Holy Loch, Scotland, Loch Ness Monster. 1960 10-18 Aaron Moran Happy Days Joni Cunningham. 1960 10-21 First British nuclear submarine HMS Dreadnought launched. So they buy a new car, but it requires the Fonzie to fix it before they can use it to sleep with girls. Fonzie uses Richie's leg to wipe the grime off and then rips off their eagle ornament as payment. They go to the submarine races. Fonzie puts a girl to sleep and gives her to Ralph Malph. So both ops go through Fonzie as a middleman. So once again sleep comms, and I believe that's the comm for the name pronounced as Fonzie. F6, on Z as in a cult person on a sleeping person. He symbolizes the pimp. That's precisely what he acts as in most episodes. He literally can snap his fingers and get dozens of girls to do whatever he wants in multiple episodes. The actor had his first appearance was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. December 29, 1936. KGB head changed to Yakov Agranov. December 29, 1936. Mary Tyler Moore born. A show that begins with a woman falling into a job as a producer for a TV program despite trying for secretary. Symbol of secretary girls to get into the blackmail game by providing girls they have access to. Note the young girl in the first scene being shown the apartment. Mr. Grant elf costume. Okay, now let's return to the very first episode of Happy Days. The comms are more clear with all that build-up. It involves Cunningham dating a girl with a slutty reputation. After he goes with the girl with the reputation, they play chess, and she misunderstands the game and ignores all the pieces and just takes his king in the first move. What does blackmail do? Exactly that. Symbol of obtaining a king without needing to play the game. A shortcut through a pretty underage girl. After taking the king, it switches to baseball, a team sport. People working together for ops. Marilyn Monroe famously dated Joe DiMaggio. The final section of the episode also involves baseball talk regarding Alaska becoming a state. Discussion of an Eskimo becoming president. This may be implying someone blackmailed by their ops could eventually rise to that level. Notice Alaska as a state passed the House the same week the NASA bill was introduced. May 24, 1958. NASA bill introduced, shooting people to stars. May 28, 1958. Alaska bill passed territory to state. This is relevant as just like with the Leave It to Beaver comms NASA ops tie into blackmail. Shooting people into stardom. This Alaska connection is something I'll go into in a future post, though the short version of my hypothesis. March 1867, Alaska purchased from Russia. April 1867, inventor of planes born. 1885 Russia makes peace with Great Britain in the Great Game. 1885 Wilbur's two front teeth knocked out in ice hockey game. Famous people, especially the ones tasked with creating new fields of science, are often the amalgam of many people and shorthanded to one person to discuss a large entity. In this case it appears to be a cooperation between Russia and USA, symbolized by America giving millions of dollars to purchase Alaska. The idea likely being development of technology which resulted in air travel. This cooperation was a counter to the bank-owned countries which Russia favored on and off through the years. I'll go more over this in a future post. Fonzie acts as the linchpin for everyone involved in those operations, as women will do anything for him. In the pilot episode, Fonzie picks up the girl for a date after Richie and Potsy date her. In episode 2, Fonzie picks up the car that becomes a submarine after Richie and Potsy have dates inside it. Fonzie is Jewish but plays an Italian, which is tricky to interpret. I need to lay out a more detailed timeline to clarify. At a glance I suspect is comms of coordination between CIA and Mossad, but I can do better with a deeper dig. Fonzie calls Cunningham the Rembrandt of bugs. Cunningham symbolizes the ones doing the actual bugging locally. One of the most prominent things Fonzie does is hit the jukebox with a magic touch, and most of the time it plays Elvis. I've long decoded Elvis as connected to these blackmail ops. Did you know when his first song was recorded? July 1, 1953, Marilyn Monroe's first Playboy model, plus Russell, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Plus 17. July 18, 1953, Elvis Presley, Heartbreak Hotel, 18-year-old first attempt at recording. July 1953, exposed underage Coppertone girl debut, start of Jodie Foster's career, exposed by Cocker Spaniel. Fonzie was the breakout character in the most popular show. This led to the pimp moving into the Cunningham house. If we are talking about Happy Days comms, there's no way to do it without discussing the famous motorcycle jumps. Fonzie jumping Trashcans plus Pat Morita. Most people only know the shark jump, but he jumps several other times. Pre-shark he jumped over 14 Trashcans to help the Japanese owner of the diner. A role switched specifically with an Italian actor to a Japanese one without explanation in that very episode. September 22, 1975. Enix founded. September 23, 1975. Fearless Fonzie equals Fonzie breaks world record jumping Trashcans. This Enix connection to this jump is big. I doubt many readers can grasp it because it requires a good memory of my past decodes. Especially when we reconcile not just with the episode but the entire season. The season finale had the Fonz acting as the best man for that new Japanese owner. The episode begins with Fonzie refusing to catch a football and instead the Japanese owner does. This transition from Italian to Japanese owners appears to reflect a change in data handling. Jewish/Italian Fonzie refuses to catch the football but Japanese/Chinese Pat Morita does. Therefore, Fonzie's jump equals data jump to beyond law enforcement jurisdiction. This ties into Enix being set up at this time. The comms I've gone over of their games fit perfectly into this. Notice the creator of Enix top game started at Shonen Jump. Akira Toriyama does art for Dragon Quest and is a big part of it. I go over those comms in several posts. The very first set of art involving Bulma dressing up as a Playboy bunny and a North Korean-styled pig, ham radio, abducting underage girls to rape. Dragon Quest is the original JRPG from which all others have a lineage to. It having its save feature tied into Catholic churches is a common theme in RPGs and involves giving them recordings. As in the ones that utilize the blackmail. This is even more clearly the case when we dissect the symbolism of that Fonzie jump. The reason why Fonzie takes on this task is because he is in a slump and no longer able to pick up girls. A title he receives and repeats several times in the episode. This is highly relevant because do you remember that title? February 4, 1980. Dr. Slump begins, little girl with tape recorder built into her, Penguin Village. February 4, 1980. Studio 54 closes, Celebrity Sex Dungeons. The origin of Enix's star Akira Toriyama. Dr. Slump. The same Enix time to the jump. This explains why the company was started as they were ops that transitioned into creating products to fund the ops. I.e. they already were doing ops but the only way they can get paid for those ops is by utilizing the media. Words like slump being a repeated key phrase tied to Enix make the connection clear. This gets to a larger point of the relationship of ops, comms, and promotion. That ops like blackmail are monetized by creating comms which can be sold to the public which then support ops. They get promoted by their allies in ops that do the same, and together they control the media by controlling ops. It all feeds into itself. Jumping Trash Can episode begins Arnold talking about selling wings, flight, at a chicken stand needing to sell more product. This is about why these ops are taken on. Cooperation gives preferential media treatment. Notice the girl that Fonzie couldn't date is compared to Jell-O. Jell-O comms if you remember that one. What was Bill Cosby famous for doing to women as they slept? These are the kinds of data that Fonzie needed to jump across law jurisdiction. Fonzie being in a slump not having a date for the very first time. So what does he do? He discusses the predicament with the Cunninghams who are watching a show about a family playing gin rummy underwater. This is a show that shows bizarre stories, and we learn that Ralph writes in every week requesting to see human sacrifice. This helps further explain why the movement was going on with data. Blackmail is one thing, but the MK data continued to become more and more dangerous to handle. So they learn of a way for Fonzie to get out of his slump, and it also allows them to get media promotion for the Japanese chicken stand. By having Fonzie jumping over trash cans at the chicken stand he gets out of his slump and Pat Morita gets high publicity for his wings. Only Cunningham can contact the network, as ham equals communication symbol. Instantly the Japanese fried chicken stand gets promotion and more business. This promise gets Fonzie out of his slump and allows him to climb the mountain, woman tied to Jell-O. Notice Elvis plays. Caught a rabbit, Fonzie tells Santa he moved as this is painting it clear that jump equals move. Framing the joke as Santa is just like Simpsons' Santa's Little Helper. The comms being of people who take on prostitutes like Fonzie as pimp payout participants as Santa. Anyway, Japan agrees to help everyone by giving everyone a discount that is part of the diner in exchange for the jump. The danger of jumping is a key part of the episode. And it is equated to recording human sacrifice. Fonzie reasoning for taking on danger is the film High Noon. This is an important connection. July 21, 1952, Japanese CIA begins. July 24, 1952, steel strike ends settled. July 24, 1952, Gary Cooper High Noon. This may just be why Japan is tied to these ops. It all comes down to steel. The foundation of a modern society building industry. Truman gets trounced over steel as his attempted takeover of the industry failed. Japanese CIA seems to have been built as a countermeasure. I.e., if you won't let us have the steel industry, we will simply make Japan the leader in that field. At least that's my current take. It fits with the auto industry and Japanese tech dominance. It might be that the central banks originally would have allowed the USA to be the top, but when Truman made a play for controlling steel they pulled the rug out from under him. That's partially speculative, and I will try to attain greater clarity in the future. This is why Fonzie relates it to a standoff, because that's exactly what it was. These ops come to a head in the 70s with a new change in data. First episode ends right as Fonzie makes the jump. Follows through with Fonzie literally crashing into the Japanese wing stand, symbol of who caught him. Symbol of Fonzie's data fully being taken in by Pat Morita. This symbol of Japan handling the data is a clear one, and it clarifies jump as a calm for data being moved across international boundaries. June 29, 1932, USSR and China sign non-aggression treaty. June 28, 1932, Pat Morita born Happy Days owner/Karate Kid teacher. China and Mexico comms tied into it alongside Japan as the root. If you recall my last post, the finders were tied to the data transfer online, and their goal was Mexico. I'm not quite sure how to connect all of these dots, but it's getting clearer. These ops go across the world and involve an international coalition so as to intimidate any one country that tries to do the right thing. And so after data jumping they get their Groucho Marx disguises. Being hidden rather than exposed with data in the USA. Final bit is a joke of a spider getting strong against a mirror. Symbol of spy and monitoring. And this all leads to him being the best man in the season finale. We can unlock even more, because notice another major episode when Fonzie himself nearly gets married. It coincides with Charlie's Angels. Both with the boss named Bosley. September 21, 1976, Fonzie loves Pinky. September 22, 1976, Charlie's Angels crime-fighting detectives Bosley. I'll have to decode Charlie's Angels in another post as this post has the maximum amount of content just going through diamonds. Involves jumping. Bosley acts as the boss of Fonzie in the show as his landlord and father figure. And given Fonzie commands girls, the symbol of Bosley giving orders to girls is equivalent. Tied to Tokyo Visit with another show. Jump being the manga of Akira Toriyama and connected to Dr. Slump/Dragon Ball, who became the artist for Enix/Dragon Warrior. Origin of all JRPGs. The main comm is tied to Pat Morita owning the diner as it relates to data being moved around. Pat Morita is most famous for Karate Kid, starring a character originally known as Danny Weber. I've established that it likely focuses on Japanese ops, however not necessarily only them. Now when looking at comms, the finale for Happy Days involved Fonzie adopting a Danny. Web equals internet. And note Danny is also the name of Fonzie's cousin earlier in the show. May 8, 1984. Happy Days finale, Fonzie adopts Danny from Big Brother after moving out. June 22, 1984. Karate Kid, Danny Weber/Daniel LaRusso. Fonzie adopts from Big Brother. You may remember Apple had the Macintosh reveal in 1984 Super Bowl focused on Big Brother. What does this all mean? Before I give my take, I want to mention that the 17th episode is the finale, but they had 6 leftover episodes that were filmed much earlier, which makes the actual conclusion of Happy Days in July, with the final episode ending with Fonzie wearing an Easter Bunny outfit and joining the secret society Leopard Lodge of Mr. Cunningham. The actual end being a pie fight. I mention this because it seems to imply a transition for people in Fonzie's position. Otherwise, the meaning, while not perfectly clear to me, does become more clear when we consider other data points. The original Danny that was Fonzie's cousin debut November 19, 1974, playing Monopoly. This was one day before the Monopoly complaint that led to the breakup of Bell Systems. Arguably the biggest Monopoly breakup of all time. November 19, 1974. Danny Butch, Fonzie nephew debut Monopoly. November 20, 1974. Bell Monopoly complaint leads to breakup. A major plot point in the episode is that baby Fonzie is violent, but unlike the real Fonzie, he doesn't do anything perverse. The whole episode it builds up to him surprising people by hitting but never trying to kiss Joni. Karate comms are tied to MK while judo are blackmail, as I go into in recent posts. The point seems to be much like the baby bells, as in breaking up Fonzie would just create more of him. Highly speculative. I'm trying to reconcile a ton of variables, so I'm sure I'm getting pieces of it. Ask you. This isn't perfectly clear though, so let's take one more set of data points into account. The most famous jump. The shark jump. There's quite a few interesting events around these dates. Once again, it's not perfectly clear to me, but I do see at least part of it. September 4, 1972. Don Ponce Happy Days Danny Bourne. September 4, 1972. Price is Right debut. September 13, 1977. Fonzie Jumps the Shark Story Part 1. January 31, 1977. Final Evel Knievel crashed jumping 13 sharks crashed during practice jump fractured collarbone. September 11, 1977. Atari 2600 release. September 14, 1977. Yolanda Price is Right exposure, most famous moment on Price is Right. September 20, 1977. Fonzie Jumps the Shark. The Atari 2600 connection is one I'll focus on. Just like switching from Atari to Nintendo, it explains there was another data jump that was later rejected. The Atari connection with Steve Jobs, Lisa tracking with Apple. Begins with Atari Breakout. This is why it becomes a joke despite the fact that Happy Days ratings did not decrease despite the pop culture view. It was only years later this was viewed as a mistake. Remember that Fonzie jumped Trashcans. Do you remember how Steve Jobs' Apple Lisa data transmission worked? Through the trash can. I went through a ton of comms connected to these ops. This breakout product connection may go far beyond just electronics. 1975, Blue Diamonds equals Lucky Charms. 1976, Breakout, Prison Comms, Atari/Bushnell Mossad Comms/Japan. 1976, Apple I release date 666.66. 1994 Blue Diamonds/Yellow Moons removed replaced with Blue Moons. 1995 Diamonds 3D Breakout clone for Macintosh. This may be coincidental, it lines up for changing of data flow. Stuff like this is me swinging widely, as sometimes I find an avalanche of connections that tell me I found the right angle to push, while other times it ends up being a misfire. I make these posts weekly, and you can surely tell there's no way for me to dig into everything well enough, so I leave a few weak threads like this here and there. It may be nothing, but so long as you understand that I can present some possibilities at times in lieu of certainty. In fact, I think it's a necessity I do this at times, otherwise people may just take my word as gospel rather than challenging the ideas within. I don't want you to agree with me all the time, I want to find the truth, and I want you to begin that same trek. For example, what is the correct birth date for the creator of Tetris, Alexei Pajitnov? March 14, 1956. Karl Marx's new tomb unveiled. March 14, 1956. Alexei Pajitnov born Tetris creator wiki gives wrong date. This is the most likely real one. There are two dates to choose from online, but I get the feeling the one above is the right one. Wikipedia gives a different answer, and given Tetris was the biggest game of all time for several years. Well, I've talked plenty about Tetris, draw your own conclusions from this, as I find it a fascinating connection. November 9, 1989. Fall of the Russian-built Berlin Wall. November 1989. Tetris released, a Russian game about walls with a song tied to blackmail, and a game published by Robert Maxwell till stolen by Nintendo. Watch above video. Now we've talked extensively about blackmail, but what about the sister ops? MK? These ops all use the same cameras in the home after all, so if Laverne and Shirley/Happy Days handle blackmail, where is the show about MK? Mork and Mindy. Ever hear of a violent orc from another planet? Like in World of Warcraft? How about Mork from the planet Orc? A character introduced in Happy Days as a space alien that has a fight with Fonzie, but in his own show they do a sequel to this story. With Fonzie setting up Laverne with him, cleaning the bugs, and then he becomes friends with a ring symbol of control. A discussion about Mork wearing penny loafers. Laverne's real name is Penny, a woman that will work cheaply. So he gets Penny. This leads to him becoming insane and trying to take her earlobe. Remember all the ear comms with Laverne and the ear statue, and Richie with ear blowing. These are MK ops, and there's a particularly clear reason for this. Remember the football catching comms that involved the data going to Japan? Opening of show involves Mork and her Charlie Brown football prank Symbolism. A show about MK kids with child psychology. Peanuts was an extension of the Howdy Doody puppet comms, origin of Peanut Gallery. Both comms about kids getting involved in ops. The very first comic being about badmouthing a kid behind his back while telling him to his face you like him. That's a major root of MK ops as it involves tricking a target into not realizing who is behind their suffering. Turning bystanders into their enemies while you remain free from targeting. First episode begins with a date rape, so quite different than the other two Fonzie shows. Mork tied to church symbolism initially, as this is where he was dropped off, as I suspect the ops were embedded in church comms. Note it's in Colorado and debut 1978. December 21, 1977. DOE established HQ in Colorado Q clearance. February 28, 1978. Mork from Ork My Favorite Ork and Happy Days debut. This was 1978 after the DOE moved to Colorado, hence his transmissions being from there. To further connect it to MK, notice the episode revolves around Mork being put in an insane asylum. Watch on his ankle. As in someone to watch these people. The priest uniform he was wearing was him wearing his clothes backwards. So they agree to study one another. The important point here is Robin Williams is symbolizing a child being MK'd. This is why she, accidentally, keeps giving him perverse books to read, as that's one of many ways children are conditioned into deviance. Calling eggs to revolt against oppressors. Losing your shells. The cop sits down on an egg of his and then arrests him. Note he calls him Smokey like Smokey in The Bandit. This was a movie about moving the data, as I went into in my September 26 post. A movie tied to moving data during the Q clearance changeover. So it connects. He imitates what he sees on TV. Including Shirley Temple on the good ship Lollipop to the moon, as in data being sent somewhere secret. This tracking of lunatics. Just like his ankle watch. December 23, 1987. Good Morning Vietnam Robin Williams breakout hit. December 23, 1987. Manson devotee escapes prison. If it were just this I wouldn't make the connection, but there's a bigger one here. July 11, 1987. Good Morning Miss Bless, Belle. December 23, 1987. Good Morning Vietnam. The title gives away the connection, this was the prototype for Saved by the Bell. Note the original teacher in that show was the daughter of Belle. This was as the Bell breakup was happening. Saved by the Bell. Why saved? Note the original principal Belding was Oliver Clark. January 4, 1939, first rescue dog. January 4, 1939, Oliver Clark born. First rescue dog. Consider these ops being tied to watching MK subjects. Not necessarily the ones actually MKing them, but potentially those watching the videos to keep bystanders free of risk. The first episode of Saved by the Bell focusing on a radio DJ just like Good Morning Vietnam. It may seem redundant for so many comms tied to these spying ops, but remember that there is a constant stream of comms-aware people being born. I believe every generation has to have comms that mark the ops they are promoted to take part in. This is why the most popular things that exist in every era are tied to these spy ops. No matter which decade I go to, the top one will involve it. Saved by the Bell was the most popular show in its demographic. The star being from Panorama. Defined as an unobstructed view. His best friend being Screech, played by a diamond that stalks Lisa, who was originally a Jewish princess. The primary characters from the original show included Dustin Diamond and Lisa, played by Voorhees. Dustin Diamond forever stalking Voorhees. Comms of keeping data on what? Lisa is not portrayed as mentally ill, but instead is extremely abusive and evasive, and that is a perfect symbol in this context, as it's keeping track of the abusers that create MK more than it is the subjects themselves. This fits perfectly with the symbol of the title, Saved by the Bell, as it's about saving lives by keeping track of dangerous cells. Very first episode involves Lisa being forced into a dance contest with Screech due to a leg injury, symbolism of Voorhees ops being hobbled by surveillance. Notice the mascot being the tigers. A com I've long went over as representing the dangerous ops. Lisa being tracking comms, and her history. Named after Cool Breeze about a diamond heist. Dustin Diamond being her perpetual stalker. Note the first episode of Saved by the Bell involves radio DJ and the first voice of Shaggy on Scooby-Doo. A personality he adopted. Zoinks as the show went on. Symbol of investigation. What was the most popular media franchise of all time again? Pokémon. A game about observing monsters and filling out an index. September 28, 2006. Pokémon Diamond. September 27, 2006. Dustin Diamond Saved by the Bell Screech sex tape preview. Notice the story of Dustin Diamond this year was of his PSP games being stolen. This would imply Nintendo winning the war to keep promotion with handhelds. PlayStation also involved in surveillance, but it seems both entities being given different tasks inside that umbrella. Also Dustin Diamond death at 44 with stage 4 cancer. Lou Diamond at 44 death tied to all this other stuff. I don't know what to make of that, but it seemed a pattern to mention. Now if Saved by the Bell was to coordinate the kids in surveillance, what was the equivalent mega popular adult one? July 1989. Seinfeld, observational comedy. August 1989. Saved by the Bell, phone. October 15, 2000. Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld successor. October 15, 2000. Pokémon Gold/Silver, Internet Connection Comms Trading. We get a clearer view as all of these comms are connected. Able to rescue people involved in this program due to spying/observation. In Seinfeld's case the one tracked would be Kramer. The neighbor who is frequently portrayed as a lunatic. There are other characters I could go into, like Mario Lopez. Fried chicken comms, KGB Chicken Russia tied to spying alongside. For Seinfeld the original cast member was the waitress, and just like the Jewish princess being recast as Lisa with the serial killer name, we get diplomatic relations with Israel and Russia. This helps define the parties attached to promotion. March 30, 1995. Telecommunications Act of 1996 allows monopolistic behavior. March 31, 1995. Monopoly Game 2 by Pokémon/Creatures Forerunner. More phone line connections and I could make this its own post. I'm leaving it a bit weak on definition as I need to finish this post ASAP. So let's move on to the first of several big updates. Neil Diamond and Biden. This is current news. December 8, 2022. Neil Diamond unretires to sing in Beautiful Noise. December 8, 2022. Pink Diamond pulled from auction after $90 million 17 gems stolen sent to Psychic. Neil Diamond unretiring to sing Forever in Blue Jeans. Same time a pink diamond was pulled due to a 17-gem heist. Marilyn Monroe comms tied to diamonds. Norma Jean Baker. And the Hope Diamond began with two different famous men named Jean-Baptiste. This is me noticing a pattern, though I do have a theory on it. The meaning in current events I suspect is tied to Biden. Why? Biden's investigations triggering reactions. Note 2020's A Beautiful Noise, released to encourage voter turnout for Biden. That's the same name as the Neil Diamond revival this year. Too specific to be coincidence. 2020, A Beautiful Noise, song for voter turnout for Biden. 2022 A Beautiful Noise, Neil Diamond Broadway show. Diamond just unretired, so obviously I look into when he retired in the first place. January 23, 2018. Biden brags about firing Shokin at CFR. January 23, 2018. Neil Diamond abruptly retires. Biden bragging not only became a major scandal for him but led to investigations of Burisma. All this ties into Diamond retiring and now the Ukraine stuff coming back. This becomes more likely when we look at the dates. The origin of that title stretches back to 1976 and involves nudity/exposure and commentary about Watergate. The original Beautiful Noise seems to be tied to a celebration of Nixon exposure with Watergate. Tied to now because the intent of Biden ops is to make him the scandal just as Nixon was. Several reasons for this, including creating a villain the country can get behind together. Changing the conversation. I suspect Neil equals Neil. As in having blackmail and making a star yield. Exactly what is owned on Biden with the laptop. I've already decoded Biden as cooperating, and I suspect what is being described is what keeps him in check. He already gave his keys to patriots to control him, he's just been not told to. Neil, that's why Neil retired alongside Biden, giving the keys away, and unretired just recently as it comes time to fulfill his obligation to. Neil, this is a theory, but it feels likely given the timings and other things we will get into later. To flesh this out, let's look further into Neil Diamond. His hero, the Jewish Neil Sedaka, who he went to high school with. These two Neils both have their most famous songs about Carol. In Sedaka's case, a famous singer that went to that same high school. Her name, Klein, in the 1970s. There was another, Klein, that began around the same time, tied to tight-fitting jeans and underwear. June 1974. Calvin Klein wins award for tight-fitting signature jeans. June 1974. Watergate trial order date. Jeans, Symbolism. Just like Neil Diamond with his Forever in Blue Jeans song. Dina equals DNA. June 22, 1973. COD awards Calvin Klein Burroughs first award. June 25, 1973. Dean begins testimony before Irvin Committee suggesting Nixon knew of the cover-up. October 9, 2018. Tiger caught with Calvin Klein cologne. October 9, 2018. Brett Kavanaugh first day Supreme Court. Cons of using Klein as symbolic for underwear to go after subjects with blackmail. Why the focus on Carol Klein? February 8, 1942. Congress advises FDR that Americans of Japanese descent should be locked up en masse, so they wouldn't oppose the U.S. war effort. February 9, 1942. Carol King Klein born Neil Sedaka. Could easily be coincidence, but I've gone over these ops as tied to submission, so I can't ignore the fact that her name is King plus underwear comms and born within a day of the internment origin. It is plus 1 day, but that fits perfectly given it led to it rather than hitting. The other Neil's famous song is Sweet Caroline and is tied to Kennedy. November 25, 1957. President Eisenhower had a stroke. November 27, 1957. Caroline Kennedy born. This may seem a strange connection, but JFK, based on my decoding initially, was perceived as an ally to the 666, this is why all the voter fraud comms tied to his win, but that's a longer story. The point here is it's possible the birth symbolized a break in ties with Eisenhower's allies, leading to JFK becoming a viable contender. Births are often used to signify a new start, so this could be that, albeit I need to dig a lot more to verify/reject. What then is the root comm of Neil Diamond? January 24, 1941. Neil Diamond born Forever Blue Jeans. January 23, 1941. Nazca becomes province, Nazca Lines. January 23, 1941. NACA Lewis Research Center NASA. NASA comms are at times about turning people into stars. The Nazca connection is tied to the origins of flight, as I've gone through in posts out back in the days of hot balloon flights. They drew a bunch of designs that then became famous mysterious discoveries presented as thousands of years old. Creating tourism with fake news like many things. These designs were also used to coordinate ops by discovering new designs every other year. They still do this, but just read my science posts for more on that. This reminds me that Enix published a game where the Nazca lines played a prominent role. You investigate them to find out where the Moon Tribe transports people. Remember that Enix was born alongside the Jump, and their games are a good guide to that data flow. It's a brief aside, but just a random example is Illusion of Gaia, which they published. Begins in a church where you can go into a dark space to save. The main character psychically picks out a ace of diamonds and then draws a giant head, person of importance, to him, which coincides with the pet pig, ham radio, of a princess coming to him as refuge. Okay, I shouldn't get sidetracked, I just like to show how these comms tie into one another again and again. Once you have an eye for it, you'll see it everywhere. There's a lot of symbols in that collage I've highlighted, and I may go into a deeper decode in the future. Let's consider Carole King again. October 31, 2011. Kardashian divorce filed. October 31, 2011. FBI releases dozens of images, clips of surveillance video of Russian spies as FOIA request. November 1, 2011. Holiday Carole King's 17th album Last. This ties into now. With Neil Diamond, A Beautiful Noise. October 29, 2020. A Beautiful Noise, Alicia Keys, Brandi Carlile. October 29, 2020. 40th birthday, Kanye Kim hologram built a firewall around our family. Kanye hologram Abbas, hologram Holocaust stories preserved, which could imply people who are dead are giving testimony somewhere in video. Since we've gone into Kanye, notice Kardashian. Egg beats Kardashian/Jenner. Control over social media, a message of who controls it. This is why Twitter is being purged. Update, Elon Musk Twitter purge. Musk reportedly fired half of Twitter's workers. You may have noticed a number of accounts leaving as well. Like this disinfo account someone linked me. I don't say that lightly, note tweeting about Hollow Earth. He asks for users' personal information for numerology reasons, a giveaway. Note his negative things said about Musk before. Half of Twitter fired. I suppose I can decode what's going on here in the next post as an example of Musk cleaning Twitter. Suddenly the shills are leaving and trying to cash out on the fame. With their inside lines being fired, there is no longer a reason to stay. Why was I removed, but this guy was not? I've always been positive and sought objective truth, but I get banned, and this guy gets traffic. I was linked this guy, and they told me they were initially very positive about Trump but have become negative over time. That sounds like a trick to slowly condition people to a viewpoint, as they would have rejected you outright had he began there. There are other decoders that aren't like the one above. A reader has taken to decoding in a similar fashion to myself. I hope this is a trend. A couple of the finds in this post actually from their individuals' tips, so they certainly are worth a read. They only have one post so far, but it's twice as long as my longest ones. I don't agree with every point they make, but several are plausible. For the final and by far most important section. Update, Beast Meteor. Mr. Beast recently dropped 3 meteors on house to celebrate Hello Neighbor. A game about finding the secrets of a suspicious cultish neighborhood that imprisons a kid. This fits into what I believe is going on now. That cooperative people are hiding to avoid getting swept up in massive law enforcement behind the scenes. The Christmas hammer coming to fruition. This becomes more clear when we look at the full video, as it involves using a decoy car with a random field used to hide the original. Decoy gets thrown into expanding water jellies. The main thing here though is getting cooperative players out of the way of law enforcement so that those that aren't cooperating can get hit with the full brunt of it. I notice a train theme being the primary expenditure this time here. Spider-Man. Spider comms. Spider plus train symbol of it, and this week there has been a surge of Spider plus train videos on YouTube with the release of an indie game about that very thing. Note Markiplier playing it. I've gone over Markiplier before, and what's particularly interesting here is that the video he made directly before the Spider train was his release of his tasteful nudes, which were so popular they broke the internet. This is the top video game streamer on YouTube, and this nude release was predicated on his fans being able to push his podcast as well as another one to the top of Spotify and Apple charts. They did this, and while that may seem like a publicity stunt, I believe this was a test of social media control. The ability to dominate the conversation is a very big deal. This is why Musk firing half of Twitter is so big. December 11, 2022. SpaceX launches Japanese lander, UAE rover to the moon. I decoded Markiplier before as sending patriotic comms and working with the military. His origin and fame is from being the king of Five Nights at Freddy, a game about surveillance and child murder. As I often say, up until recently you don't get a voice unless you cooperate to send bad messages. To his credit, I believe as soon as the opportunity arose he jumped on the chance of moving in a non-evil direction. His comms tie into my COVID decodes, which I hope you have read. The symbol of flipping, and with him acting as a messenger for those trying to flip. How to escape from a hostage situation, so his nudes could symbolize a potential exposure of the ops tied to child murder. His comms go hand in hand with Mr. Beast because, as stated, it's all about getting friendlies out of harm's way before the law hammer drops. His domination of Spotify, one of many tests going on right now to demonstrate control across the board of media. Another test being Kanye, as I went into in my last post. This all converges right as I finish making this post. The newest of the new news. August 31, 2011. NASA shuttle program ends. August 31, 2011. DC reboots entire universe with New 52. December 14, 2022. DC ends New 52, replacing it with multiverse including Christopher Reeve's Superman and Michael Keaton's Batman. February 15, 2022. Donald Trump's superhero 99 comms. Flipped 6 comms. This is just like Musk with Twitter, and if you read the NASA decodes from earlier you already understand the connection there with making stars effectively control over media. In today's terms, that's Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. There are comms everywhere giving a preview. I haven't decoded it, but this Dear Moon comm looks promising. Bringing civilians into the stars. Includes a YouTube content creator. Dear Moon / Dear equals DOE equals Q. Though I need to dig a lot deeper before I can understand what is going on here. This brings us back to Mr. Beast. Why is that video that ties into spiders and digging into secrets and trains titled with crushing a Lamborghini? Video ends with a discussion of it no longer working. November 16, 1936. Wallace Simpson ultimatum given by Baldwin, leads to abdication of the King of England. November 16, 1936. Lamborghini engineer born, driven by Bob Wallace. The symbol of Lamborghini is likely in the lamb plus driving plus riches. Symbol of an ultra-wealthy cult driving the sheep, mass populace. The people involved used symbolism comms tied to overthrowing the King of England using their control of the public. This fits and understanding the relationship of the changes going on today with the end of the narratives defined by the 666, and we can see we are on the precipice of something big. No more being shepherded by those with bad intentions for us all. It's been a long process. They had to do a lot of things that seemed counterintuitive if you weren't following the comms. Afghanistan, for example. November 26, 2022. Taliban helped build World Cup in Qatar. And there's so much to be revealed from every side. November 19, 2022. Call of Duty is a government psyop. These documents prove it. Missions include assassinating an Iranian general clearly based on Qasem Soleimani in the first 5 minutes. But perhaps we are about to see something big and long planned out. April 20, 2018. Question Trump card coming. Plus 1,700. December 15, 2022. Trump sells $99 Trump superhero cards. I find that exciting. I also am somewhat annoyed at myself for posting this without the needed time to edit the last few sections. At times, I feel my duty is mostly to dig up as much as possible, but when it comes to presenting it, oh, I never have enough time to give the presentation the love and care it needs to be easily digestible. I know I can. I just don't. If I did, I'd probably have at least 10x more audience from word of mouth alone, but that would be in exchange for about 1/100th of the amount of posts. And therefore my comms awareness would be about where it was 2 years ago instead of now. If by chance we are on the precipice of major promotion, then when it begins I'm going to make major changes to facilitate an improvement in presentation. No more posting rough drafts onto the public and pretending it's good enough. Having said that, I doubt it's time just yet. Paying close attention, the comms seem to be more about criminal punishment, so I think we are still running dark, so to speak, at least for a little while longer. These social media flexes of Musk and Markiplier and others are impressive, but it seems to me it's less about what they are about to do so much as it is demonstrating to comms-aware people that, hey, look what we can do whenever we want to, do you want to be against this? I.e. still in the phase of getting mass cooperation with these entities. That's my takeaway, and perhaps in another week I'll have more on that. I'll likely just keep digging as fast and deep as possible until I see a new phase that necessitates a change. I'm microscopic, but for the few who can keep up I like to think I provide a valuable resource, smiley face. Telegram chat. Join our Telegram group. Send leads, begin decoding. This has been The Hope Diamond Curse, Fonzie's motorcycle jumps and major updates.